I'm going to talk to you today about carburetor icing. Um, so this is a phenomenon that I think we're experiencing on this fan. Um, you may recall actually in one of my previous videos, I was remarking how when I was touching the carburetor, it was seeming extremely cold. I think that's what's happening here, and I think this is probably what's causing some of the performance issues we're having with the van. And like those performance issues are basically just an extreme kind of lag and acceleration, like a flat spot. When you go to accelerate, there's just a lag in response. It's not, it's not jumping off the line as quickly as it could in first gear. So generally, yeah, that can be caused by carburetor icing. So what is carburetor icing? Well, basically what happens is the carburetor gets cold as the engine warms up, essentially, and it causes the fuel not to vaporize properly inside the inlet manifold. Now it might seem counterintuitive that the carburetor gets cold when the engine warms up, but there's a reason for that. Basically, what happens is due to the kind of the cooling effect of air being drawn in down through this throat here, like through the carburetor, through this throat, the engine, the carburetor gets cooled a little bit, and also it gets cooled by evaporation of fuel. The same way like a fridge works or any other cooling system, they work by evaporation of a liquid cools the surrounding area. And there's probably more physics around it than that, but that's basically what happens here. So the carb gets cooler and cooler, and then eventually the fuel being sprayed in is essentially just a liquid which can't really burn properly. It's not burning the right way. It can't burn inside the cylinders, and it can't create a bang in the cylinders, so you don't get the power that you need, and it leads to that kind of flat spot and acceleration. So I've actually got what's called the heat riser pipe assembly off another. This is off another engine. So essentially, what this does is this aims to combat carburetor icing. Now on water-cooled cars, water-cooled engines, and engines with dual carburetors which sit directly over the warm heads, that's not so much of a problem. But when you have the carburetor located all the way in the middle here, relatively far away from any kind of heat source, icing is much more of a problem. So what they do is, what Volkswagen did was they bring the heat to the carburetor. So that's done in two ways. The first way, when the engine is cold, when you start it initially, is there's a warm air pickup pipe down here, which takes warm air directly off the cylinders, which are the first things to warm up. And there's a thermostatically controlled flap inside the air cleaner here, and that when the engine is cold, it draws the warm air down through here, and then down into the carburetor, so the carb is getting warm air all the time. It starts up, and then when the engine's warm enough, the flap closes and it just takes in air through this little horn here from the engine bay as normal. And the other way that the engine combats carburetor icing is it uses these heat riser tubes here, which these are connected directly to the exhaust manifold, which gets red hot as the engine warms up. All the exhaust gases are going through it, and these pipes scavenge heat, because heat naturally wants to rise. So it rises up through these tubes here from either side, and this is where the evaporated fuel is sprayed in by the carburetor. So the fuel mist is sprayed in here, and then the heat heats up these tubes, heats up this tube, and the heat rises up through the carb and stops the icing process happening. But if this becomes blocked in any way, this whole process can be stopped in its tracks, and this whole tubing here will start to cool down. I've seen videos online where it gets so bad there is actually physical ice forming on this tube here and on the carburetor. And yeah, so the way these tubes can get blocked is because they're taking exhaust gases in. There's carbon and other deposits being deposited inside these tubes, and eventually they just block them, or the tubes aren't, the diameter of them gets too small. The heat can't rise through efficiently enough, and then the whole thing breaks down, and you end up with carburetor icing. So yeah, that's I think that's what our problem is here, because those two pieces here definitely feel very cold when the engine's been running for a while. So yeah, we need to unblock these tubes, and the way you do that is you first have to take this off the van, and then just, I mean, you can soak it in carburetor cleaner overnight to clean out any carbon deposits or anything like that. You can use a frayed metal cable, on the end of a drill to sort of go through there and score out any dirt or any stuff in there. But yeah, like anything at all to just unblock those pipes. But yeah, that's what we're going to do here. Well, we need to get the carburetor off and the air cleaner off. We also need to detach the two end pieces here on the intake manifolds. We need to unbolt the ends of these, the other ends of the heat risers here. Yeah, and these two pipes here as well, these fresh air pipes. I think we are also probably going to have to try and move the alternator, because that's going to get in the way. I'm hoping maybe we can get away without having to do that we can just pull it out, but we'll see what happens. We'll see how much room we have to work with, because there isn't a lot of clearance beneath that alternator stand, so we might need to move that as well to get the necessary space to pull the heat riser tube out. Once we've got it out of the van, I'm going to give it the cleaning of its life, and make sure that I don't have to ever do that again. Yeah, we tried getting the nut on the back of the fan off. That didn't work. It was just torqued up too much. Now, yeah, like I don't think I couldn't break it loose. I think it's just to do with the fact that you can't get a long enough breaker bar back there. There isn't enough space. So I'm going to try an alternative method I've read about, which is we'll raise this fan housing here up a little bit. Hopefully there's enough clearance behind this. We'll be able to get it up behind that structural member there. And yeah, so in order to raise the fan housing, we need to do a couple of things. We need to take the fan housing is actually only attached by two screws on either side there. We may need to unbolt the oil cooler housing as well that's attached to the fan housing, and perhaps the linkage with there's flaps in the fan housing, so we might need to take that linkage off. But one thing we'll definitely have to remove then is the thermostat down here. So I'm just going to take that off now, because that's physically linked to the fan housing by a rod. So we have to unscrew that, because it won't. That'll stop us from pulling the fan housing up. So I'm just going to get my ratchet on it here and unbolt it. We just need to unscrew this fella here from its rod. Yeah, out it comes. Easy enough. Easy enough to have one of these on your van or your Beetle. Don't get rid of it, because they're like gold dust, and they perform a extremely important function for properly cooling the engine. It's out. Now, in order to do that, we had to lift up the fan housing And in order to lift up the fan housing, we had to take out a couple of things, which I wasn't sure whether I had to take out or not, but I know now that you do. So in order to lift up the fan housing, we had to take out the linkage at the back that links the flaps on the fan housing. That's held in by two little sort of tang type clips. So you get those off. They're a little bit awkward, but you can get at them. And then there's also a spring as well here. Don't lose that. And just remember the way that this goes back in as well. Take a photograph or whatever so you remember which way it goes. Also had to take off this little bit of tinware here, which goes over the duct for the oil cooler. This is kind of like the waste hot air chute for the oil cooler, so the air gets ducted out onto the road. That's attached to the fan housing, which is in turn attached to the engine, so you need to kind of get that off as well to be able to lift the fan housing up. There's also another little bit of tinware that it goes on the bottom here that ducts the air out onto the road, and that was screwed in as well, so I needed to remove that too. So yeah, once you got those things off, then you can take out the two screws on either side here of the fan housing, and then basically any way you can, just lift it up, maneuver it around. You'll need at least two people to do this. You can't do it by yourself, it's too bulky and heavy. And then once you've gotten it up enough, you kind of just manhandle the alternator out. But you need to get this part above the heat riser pipes in order to get enough clearance. You can get it around the generator stand or the alternator stand, no problem. But it does take a little bit of pulling, but you need to lift the fan housing up as far as it'll go to get enough clearance. There's a few things also in the way, like just get wires and stuff out of the way before you lift it up, and make sure that nothing snags, like fuel lines or anything like that. So yeah, once you've got that off, then we can take out the heat riser pipes, which is the actual objective. Now we need to get the alternator stand out of the way here because it's stopping the heat riser pipe from coming out. So we just use a 13mm socket just to get this off. This should be interesting. I think this is the first time I've taken this particular piece off. Oh yeah, there's a seal under there. There is a seal of some kind under there. This doubles as the oil filler neck as well, so when you top up the engine oil, it goes down through here. Interesting. Okay. Now, let's maneuver that out of the way and keep our little paper gasket here. Oh God, that is a very fragile gasket. If you're interested, you can see down there where the oil goes into the engine when you fill it up. Pretty cool. So now I'm thinking finally that this absolute bane of my life will come out. Yes. And she does. Okay, it's finally out. That was an absolute mission, but we have it off the van now, so we can actually clean it properly. But yeah, that's gonna be another video. So come back soon to see the exciting drilling action and cleaning action here on this very dirty heat riser pipe. So good. Yeah, see you soon.